Hi, welcome to our TeachMeet on planning an inclusive, impactful and stress-free sports day. I'm Danny Robinson. I'm the educational content lead for PE at Twinkl, and I'll pass to Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Boyce and I am a PE content writer at Twinkl and have organised many sports days over the years. And I'll pass over to Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Draper. I'm PE content writer editor at Twinkl. I'm going to be starting us off today with the introduction. So here's what's going to be covered in today's session. Hopefully a lot of information and a few things for you to take away that will help with a smooth, enjoyable sports day for you all this summer term. So I won't run through all of these, but if you could just have time to see what we are going to cover in our session today there. Okay, Amy, if you could just move on now for me, please. So it's really important to start with to think of, why are you doing a sports day? You know, sports days are one of the most traditional days in the school calendar. But why are we actually still doing our sports day as part of the calendar? Sports days can mean different things to us all. They evoke a range of feelings and emotions. For some people, they're the best day of the year. For others, it's the hardest day of the year, and that's the same for adults and our experiences and our memories of sports days from school. But also that's the same for children, and we've got to put ourselves in their shoes as well. Ultimately, we want it to be the best, most enjoyable day for them, and something that they will look back on and feel that they have achieved, that they've been a part of. And that's why it's really important at its core that sports day is inclusive for all. It's an enjoyable day. It fosters a sense of community, a chance for the school community and the wider community to all come together for a real celebration together of children's achievements, particularly in physical activity. A chance to promote teamwork and positive attitudes towards physical activity as well. Positive experiences of sports day are a real big part of actually developing physical literacy. Now, this is quite a buzzword at the moment around PE, but also around schools as well. What physical literacy is our relationship with physical activity going forward into adulthood. If you could just flick on there, Amy, for me, please. So it's our relationship with movement and physical activity throughout life. Really essential for that lifelong aim of building a healthy and active lifestyle. And those memories of sports day can really, if they're positive, can really motivate children to get involved in different physical activities and to keep participating in those going forward into adulthood. And that's what we want. That's what's going to build that physical literacy and actually a healthier community and society actually going forwards. So what are the aims of your sports day? And that's maybe what you need to be thinking as this session goes on. Your aims will be very different to another school's aims. It depends on your setting. It depends on your children and on your school community. But it's really important to have those key aims in mind, and we'll look at a few of those in a minute that can maybe help to trigger your thoughts on that. And then how will you achieve these aims? Well, Amy and Danny will talk a little bit more about that later. So potential aims of sports day, and I'm sure some of these will ring true for lots of you. It might not be just one of these, it'll probably be a mixture. To build social skills and connections, and that's between children, between classmates. It might be between year groups, or it might be social connections with other schools. For example, I've delivered a sports day that had high school sports leaders coming in. So that was building those connections for the wider school community. Looking ahead to maybe those children going on to that secondary school and being those people in the future. For children to experience healthy competition, because actually we don't want to get rid of competition fully. Competition is a part of life. It's definitely a part of sport. And it is going to be, and it's something that's in the curriculum now, but it's also something that is still has been highlighted in the curriculum review, and he's definitely going to be in the upcoming curriculum from what we've heard. So it's something that we need to encourage, but also support children with as well, to help them to do it in an enjoyable way and compete in an enjoyable way. For children to experience new sports and physical activities, you know, you'll see some of these non-traditional activities in a little while, but it might be that your school has worked on a particular sport or has introduced something. For example, a school I worked at had archery equipment, and they introduced that into their sports days. They were classed themselves as a skipping school. They did that every break time. So again, skipping challenges came into their sports day. So bringing these things into their sports day and molding it into how you want it to be for your school. To develop confidence and competence, but in a supportive environment, a place where children feel that they can try their best and try and achieve their personal bests, and not necessarily look around them, look just at their achievements as well, in that supportive environment, achieve their own goals. To build community spirit, bringing everyone together. And that's a really important thing. You know, a sports day can be a wonderful day for the whole community, for parents, grandparents, carers, everybody involved. Like I said earlier about secondary schools as well, maybe getting involved, local sports partnerships, getting as many people as involved. And that ultimately, if you are a PE lead, could also involve volunteers as well that can lend a helping hand on the day. To raise the profile of PE, sport and physical activity as part of a healthy lifestyle. As I mentioned earlier about this physical literacy, to build, you know, those adults of the future who really want to maintain physical activity for a happy and healthy lifestyle. And ultimately, to create positive sporting experiences for all children, so that they you know, see it as a day to look forward to, a day that they've enjoyed, a really key part of the school calendar, that highlights that they, you know, that gives them that enjoyment of physical activity and movement. So in terms of supporting you, you're going to hear a lot of ideas and about some different resources that are available for you as well. But every setting varies. Your setting will be very different to someone else in the group here. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to sports day. So we're going to share some ideas, suggestions, adaptations, modifications, and also some specific resources that we have available that might support you with the day as well. These will help you in planning, delivering a successful sports day. They're inclusive, hopefully very engaging, which we think they are, and enjoyable for all children. And it's really important that it's all children as well. That everyone feels an equal part of sports day and can enjoy it as much as everyone else. So I'm going to pass on to Amy now for the next part.
Thanks, Paul. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I have got a fair amount to get through, so I'm going to hopefully not speak too quickly, but equally, try and sort of get through as much as I can at a good pace. So as Paul's just said, I'm going to talk about sort of what you might want to include in your sports day. And I'm going to go talk about the traditional and the non-traditional type events and activities. So we'll start with traditional, which are your sort of classic sports day events that you might typically think about when you think of sports day, egg and spoon, those types of races. They typically do involve running, jumping and throwing events. They have like a familiar structure to them. They are the sort of events that will contribute to your school values, but will probably most definitely focus on the physical skills and have some sort of competitive or race element to them. So just an extra on competition, which I know Paul's already spoken about. Obviously, it is an important and positive element of PE and school sport, and it plays an important role in children's physical, social and emotional development. Other benefits here, obviously it helps with motivation and effort. So having a challenge or goal will increase the engagement or the focus of the children. It helps with building resilience. Children will learn to cope, hopefully, with winning and losing and managing disappointment in a healthy way. Competition also can provide opportunities to apply skills that have been learnt and use them in a sort of more meaningful and real life situation. There's the sports personship element, and obviously particularly respect, and children through competition can learn how to respect rules, teammates, learn about the importance of fair play. And then obviously finally, a lot of competitive activities do involve teamwork and cooperation, so bringing competition into your sports day will hopefully help with a lot of these benefits that competition can have. I think I'm ready for the next slide. So I'm going to talk about the traditional events. I'm going to start with the track events, and if you just click, Paul, they'll sort of come down one after the other. And like I said, these are sort of the events that we all know about and will likely include or feature in your sports day somewhere. So obstacle, sack, egg and spoon, three-legged. These events can also be run as relay events. So you might pick a few that are individual races, and then take a few as well and make them into relay events as well. And then depending on your setting and what you have in terms of a track, you might have a lovely large field with a circular track. You might have a smaller space, which means that you have sort of just one straight track where you might have to do shuttles or do parts of a straight leg each in the relay. So then moving on, we've also got other things to consider when you're organising your track events. So making sure that the distance is appropriate to the age and the ability. You don't want children doing 50-metre sack races, that's far too long. And equally, you don't want a sprint race that's going to sort of be finished before it's even started. Make sure you've got clear start and finish lines with cone or tape. And that would include a safe runoff area beyond the finish line where they can sort of slow down and stop safely. Use those adults and sports leaders as much as possible, and one of those is for the sort of potentially the positions as children cross the finish line. You might choose to have somebody that's in charge of the first position only, and they give them a sticker or send them wherever they need to go, and somebody else is in charge of just the second place, and so on. And then finally, preparing children so they know what to expect at the start and the end of a race as well is quite important. I've been to my own children's sports days where some start on the whistle, some don't know that it's going to be a whistle, there's false starts, there's all sorts of things. So just preparing children and making sure that all of the adults as well know that the children are going to start with a take marks, get set, go, or whistle just helps as well. And with all of these things, we strongly recommend that there's a focus on personal best, effort and taking part, and not just the winning and the coming first. Just a little extra note for preparing Key Stage 1 and EYFS children. Obviously, it might well be their first ever sports day, so doing some events prior to the day to help build familiarity is recommended. Like I said earlier, just making sure that that they know what they're listening to at the start of a race. Running in a straight line could be, obviously, as we know, quite a challenge and quite difficult, and staying in that lane. So that is because it requires quite advanced spatial awareness, which most 4- and 5-year-olds are still developing. So we've got some practical sort of ideas here where you might want to just get rid of the track entirely and create extra wide runways to give children a bit more space and a greater margin for error, or use the lines, but then make them sort of more visual by putting down spots or cones to help them sort of stay in their tunnel or stay in their track. I think next, so that's the traditional track events. We've got the field events now, which is your jumping and your throwing events. So with the throwing events, that would include throwing for distance potentially, such as an overarm throw or a javelin. Throwing for accuracy, so aiming for a target such as a hoop or a bucket. And then you might want some more inclusive ideas here, which they don't throw at all, but they do a roll of a ball, or perhaps doing a throw from a seated position. Things to consider when you're setting up your field events, so to make sure you've got a clear throwing line, and then the waiting area is away from the throwing area, ideally behind where they're throwing from. you've got a clear signal for them to go and collect the equipment. Even better, if you've got enough sports leaders or adults, they can return the equipment to the throwing line to make the activities just run a bit more quickly and smoothly. Also adults helping with measuring and recording with these sorts of activities, and always make sure the equipment is appropriate to the age and ability. On to the field events of jumping. So jumping events might look like the standing long jump, which is how far children can jump, or the vertical jump, how high they can jump, or you might have at your school a speed bounce mat, so jumping side to side in a certain amount of time, how many times they can do it. For Key Stage 1 children, this could look a little bit different. Things like aiming for a hanging target, ribbons, scarves, balloons, or counting how many high fives they can reach on hand targets on the wall. Quite a simple activity that can keep them going for a while, and obviously just a bit more appropriate for younger children. Factors to consider with jumps: demonstrate them where possible and emphasize the landing safely aspect with bent knees, etc. And as always, focus on the personal best effort and taking part. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the traditional events. So now just moving on to the non-traditional, where there is less emphasis on the winning and more on the success being measured through effort and collaboration rather than just strength and speed. And everybody gets to participate without that pressure of coming first or whatever the pressures bring, perhaps from the more traditional races and activities, which hopefully then would be more enjoyable for those children who do find the traditional side maybe a bit more stressful. They can try new and varied activities and challenges, which would obviously support more of an inclusive approach to PE. This is a Japanese sports day, I think, which looks like a really fun activity, pushing along huge inflatable balls, which we don't have in any of our resources, sadly, but it does look quite fun, I think. Okay, so some of the ideas that we've included in our sports day activity packs that you could include for your non-traditional events. And we've got lots of different ideas that you can include. So for Key Stage 1, it would be activities. Maybe you'd want to include some fun aiming activities, throwing and catching with different types of equipment like we've got here. Sort of not so much pressure for the children. There's no race or finishing first. It's just having a go, maybe working against their own personal best, how many they can achieve, and then if they can beat their own personal best. Working with others, so cooperation challenges like we've got here. So trying to sandwich the hoop between two people and moving about in a space. And you might want to incorporate some sort of competition in that as well, where they are racing against others. Otherwise, it doesn't have to include that competitive element so much in your non-traditional events. Again, loads of stuff you can do with hoops, and this is a fun activity you could set up where children aim for the hoops with beanbags. Some of the non-traditional events for Key Stage 2 that you might want to include, that again, we've got lots of different activities you can pick and mix from in our packs. So throwing with different types of equipment, not just your regular beanbags or balls, for example, heaving a cushion, wanging a welly, so having a go at that, which is a good old traditional activity, but I'm sure lots of children have probably never had a go at. Something like bottle flipping is a great one for children to try and have a go at, so start collecting those bottles now. Jumping challenges where you're working perhaps just against yourself. How many times can you jump through the course of a direction, different directions there you can see in a certain amount of time, or can you keep with your feet between the lines? Again, some more ideas for challenges that involve cooperation and teamwork, such as this sandwiching a ball between their hands here. There are lots of different ways that you may want to plan and structure your sports day. Again, like Paul said, there is no one size fits all really, but I'm just going to give you a few suggestions so that you can include traditional and non-traditional activities together to ensure that there's a balance of competition, participation and enjoyment. So one which way is that you could have 2 equally weighted sessions. The traditional events take place in one half or one of the sessions, and then you have a break and then take part in the non-traditional events. It's quite a simple way of doing it. There is a carousel of station idea where you put children into small groups and they take part in a range of activities, both traditional and non-traditional activities, and they move around in their group doing the different activities as they go. You may want to have two groups. So one begins split, and then this could be split, I don't know, upper key stage 2 and lower key stage 2. One begins with the non-traditional activities, whilst the other take part in the traditional events on the track. The groups then swap halfway through the session and do the opposite. So this is a good way to help manage the space and the equipment. And I've worked at schools before where that's a great way to organise the day. And then the last one is having a combination. So you could combine just the field events, the track events, so the field events with a range of non-traditional activities, and then have your showcase track events, which those kids that love that part of sports day, they all get to sit down and watch and support and celebrate each other's efforts, with the relays involved in the track events as well at the end of the day, potentially. So there's some ideas for different ways of sort of planning and setting up your day. So moving on to scoring. So similarly to how no single approach will suit every setting when it comes to organising and structuring your sports day, the same principle applies with scoring. It will depend on what you want to get out of the day, how the score's recorded, and it will take into account, obviously, things like the activities that you've chosen, groupings, etc. So what we would say, though, is that scoring should support the purpose of your sports day. So whether that is competition, inclusion, personal development, or a balance of all three, which obviously is possible, just make sure that your scoring sort of goes and works alongside that. Yeah, so you could reward performance, coming first, coming second, throwing the furthest. You could reward a score and recognise those sporting values. We call them star values in PE Mastery, which Danny's going to talk about a bit later on. So you could recognise the sporting values, or you could have a mixture of two, a hybrid scoring system where both of those things are scored for and recognised. So I'm just going to talk through some different ways of sort of collecting scores, some practical ideas that you might consider trying, perhaps if you haven't tried before, if you're looking for different ways of scoring, because I know that can be a bit of a headache. So the first one is the score sheets, where points are added to score sheets. Sheets move around with the different activities and with the groups as they do the activities, and then the totals are then calculated at the end of the day. For Key Stage 2, you might choose to also have a scoring table. I know I've worked at schools before where they've had like a central table, and then all the scores get taken to the table throughout the day and the scores are totted up. And then if you're brave enough, you could display the running totals as the day sort of goes on, just to build the excitement. But that's quite a lot of pressure, I appreciate. You could have a stickers scoring system, great for the younger children, where the teams have a score sheet of some sort, or the houses, if you've got your different houses or coloured houses, and then after completing an activity, children receive stickers which they physically stick onto their sheets, and you can sort of use the stickers count the stickers as their scores. And then in a similar sort of way, you could have a counter or token system. Teams or individuals receive a physical counter or a token, different colours for different houses. The tokens are then placed into a team pot or a bucket, and then they're counted to determine the final scores. And obviously that's a great way if you've just, you've got a pocket full of counters and you see a child who's helping another child, or a child who's shown really like great resilience because they didn't want to do a race and then they found the courage to take part in the race. You hand them a counter throughout the day. I mean, it could be used alongside a score sheet, just to collect the counters or tokens and then see at the end of the day which team have collected the most. Okay, so just a little bit of information about EYFS, because I appreciate the day could look quite different, obviously, for the younger children. It's certainly not going to probably be as long. And to be aware that obviously children of 4 to 5 year olds basically have quite a limited stamina, so an attention span. So, that's why we don't want to have a much longer day. but we would recommend that you include both traditional and the non-traditional. The way that we have organised it in some of our resources is that we've split them into 6 different areas, you can see here, and then you could potentially just pick a few different individual races, for example, or throwing activities or teamwork activities, and then put together your own sports day, including a few different things under those headings. So a bit of a pick and mix idea there. And these activities would all focus on the fundamental movement skills, and then also ideally success would be measured through effort and participation with these younger children rather than winning. So just moving on, as I said before, it does work well to keep sports day sort of to less time, 60 to 90 minutes approximately, just to help with those limited stamina and attention spans. And obviously it's a very different day from their normal routine. Using a shorter carousel format where children move continuously between the activities works well, and obviously this closely mirrors the continuous provision they're familiar with in the classroom. So scoring for EYFS. Avoid maybe formal recording of scores. Times and distances will sort of be meaningless for those younger children, but do recognise this and celebrate effort, improvement, participation and positive involvement through stickers or certificates, etc. And you may want to just recognise the finishing order of some of the races. It's always nice, to get a first, second or third place sticker, as well as children receiving a sticker for taking part, participating. And that's me done. I'm going to pass over to Danny.
Yeah, it's really important as well to consider inclusion when we're planning for sports day so that all children can participate and enjoy the day. So how you'll achieve this, I suppose, will look very different in each school depending on the unique needs of your school community. So I'm just going to share some sort of strategies that you can use regardless of how you choose to set up your day and the way that it runs. So one of the ways, which I know has been mentioned kind of throughout, is by celebrating personal bests. So this can be kind of embedded throughout sports day to create a really inclusive ethos. So personal best basically recognises individual progress over position. So rather than children competing against others, children compete against themselves to try and improve upon their previous score. So sort of some of the key benefits of this, I suppose, are that regardless of learners' starting points or their ability level, progress can be celebrated for all children. It also really supports children to start to be able to set goals and reflect upon and recognise their own and others' progress, not just in sports day, but also, I suppose, in wider physical activity and even outside of PE. Every learner can also experience achievement and success. So I suppose where we're just celebrating position, quite often what you tend to see at sports days, you've got the same few children coming first, second and third each time. So it's a really nice way for every learner to really feel that they have achieved something and they've had a really successful sports day, which of course then supports with motivation and also supports them to engage in sports day as well. And because we are rewarding the effort and the progress, this obviously just kind of really develops that growth mindset, again, both in sports day, but actually then that does transfer to sort of wider school life and even outside of school. And another one of the things that we have mentioned quite a lot is the STAR values. So STAR values is kind of something that we use throughout PE Mastery. It stands for spirit, teamwork, attitude and respect. And again, these can be rewarded throughout sports day just to help create a really inclusive and positive environment. So spirit might be awarded for things like showing enthusiasm, putting in a lot of effort, and also sort of supporting and cheering on and encouraging their friends. Teamwork, so whether it is actually teamwork activities or individual activities, teamwork can still be rewarded. So sort of like working together to help their peers, collaborating and communicating well with their friends, and demonstrating a really positive attitude to kind of having that positive mindset, persevering, being determined, kind of demonstrating resilience. Perhaps if a child was a bit reluctant to take part in an activity at first, but then actually participated, had a really kind of positive mindset and persevered to kind of participate. And also children that are demonstrating respect. So things like congratulating others, regardless of where they come, sort of cheering on people that have done well and been successful, participating safely, fairness, honesty, and also taking care of equipment. So again, these are kind of like really important, because by creating an inclusive environment that rewards positive sportive behaviour, children will start to feel more motivated to engage with both sports day and physical activity outside of school. So this not only helps to create that positive environment in sports day, but also a wider positive environment for PE. And again, the STAR values can be embedded not just in sports day, but also in PE. And it also really just helps children to understand that importance of enjoying physical activity. And by celebrating and rewarding healthy participation, it makes it a more enjoyable day for everyone. So in addition to this, we can also set up an inclusive station. So yeah, embedding STAR values and personal best throughout the day, but then also perhaps setting up an inclusive station. So this is just a station really that can be used for children that might need to kind of emotionally regulate away from the noise and the pace of sports day. Sports day can present quite a sort of overstimulating sensory environment. There's lots of noise, it's generally outside, there's a lot of kind of change in routine, so kind of having that safe space away from everything else can really kind of help children to reset and take a break. It also gives them the opportunity to explore the equipment at their own pace. They've not got the pressure of scoring or timing or competition. But what it also does is kind of gives them the freedom to choose what they do with the equipment. So they can choose the piece of equipment they'd like to use and choose what to do with it. So by giving them that freedom, it kind of encourages children that might be very reluctant to participate to start to participate and be active. And then can we just have the next slide, please? And then in addition to some of those strategies I've mentioned, we can also use the STEP principle to adapt different activities. So on our sports day activities, we have suggested different ways that some of the activities can be adapted. So I'm just going to go over some sort of more general adaptations that you can kind of make to activities. So firstly, the S stands for space. Do you mind just popping on to the next slide, Paul? Thank you. So one of the first things to consider when we're planning sports day is thinking, actually, is the surface that sports day is kind of taking place on, is that accessible for all learners? And not just thinking about the surface of where it's happening, thinking about how do children get to that space. So for example, if there are steps, are all children able to travel up the steps? Because we want to make sure that absolutely every child can participate in sports day equally. And also when participating in activities, we might increase or decrease the distance. So it might increase or decrease challenge. You also might consider having some activities set up in quieter zones or kind of where you position children, particularly kind of like away from the noise of spectators, which for some learners may kind of add a lot of pressure. You could also consider adding things like visual cues at each station, just to remind children of the key steps of what they need to do. So for example, a throwing station might have a really simple photo of someone throwing a beanbag, for example, just as a kind of bit of a visual reminder. And then the next one is tasks. So this looks at how we adapt the task to kind of provide an appropriate level of challenge. So one of the things that you might do, for example, for a race is turn them into self-paced challenges. So you might say, actually, how many lengths of the track can you complete in 30 seconds rather than having a traditional race? And I suppose one of the ways that this supports inclusion is that rather than having a race and children all finishing at a different time, all the children finish at the same time. So in that sense, although you will have some children that have them more lengths, there's no kind of clear winner and no one instantly feels like upset because they might have come behind their peers. Sometimes also time limits can add pressure and actually create a bit of a barrier to accessibility. So it might be that time limits are adapted or removed entirely, just to kind of remove that pressure. In some cases as well, you might need to adapt or provide alternative movements for some children. So for example, if you had a jumping for distance activity, you might actually adapt the movement to a beanbag throw for a child who's in a wheelchair. And another way that you can kind of adapt the task is by adapting or removing scoring. So one of the ways you might adapt scoring is, for some children, you might alter the scoring zones. So for example, you might have a hoop that's a 3, a hoop that's a 5, and a hoop that's a 7, like pointer for getting a beanbag in it. You might actually change the scoring and change the distance of the hoops for certain groups of children. The next one is equipment. So lots and lots of adaptive equipment that you can get for sports day and PE in general. So things like easy grip equipment or rolling ramps. A lot of this specialist equipment might be suggested by occupational therapists that work with individual children, and they might be things that you have in school already. So it's kind of considering, can every child access the event? And if they can't, what adaptive equipment might support them? Another thing that you can do is adapt the size or the weight of equipment. So one thing I suppose that a lot of people probably have access to is higher or lower hurdles. But also use of like lightweight equipment, so things like balloons or beach balls. They're easier to track if you have any activities that involve throwing and catching. And also sensory equipment, so having things like high visibility markers to kind of show boundaries or lines, or for example, like to show the edge of the running track lanes. Hand and feet markers, so these can be useful for children who are throwing, just kind of to remind them where their feet need to be behind the line. And sensory equipment such as balls with bells in, again, if there's a throwing and catching activity. And you also might like to include a guide rope for running for any children who have visual impairments. And yeah, brightly coloured equipment, so kind of along with high visibility markers, using things like brightly coloured balls, brightly coloured beanbags, just support children to be able to see them really clearly. And the final one is people. So this is kind of how we use and adapt kind of the different people that are there to support and involved to, I suppose, level the playing field. So one of the things you might consider is having balanced groupings, so having children of sort of similar ability level within the same group, so that it kind of evens out the competition. It gives children a lot more kind of opportunity to, I suppose, come first, second and third if you're going down a competitive sports day route. If you're going down a more traditional sports day, less traditional sports day route, sorry, you might choose actually to have mixed ability groupings where you've got a lot of sort of teamwork challenges where children can all support each other. It's also important to consider sort of supportive peers or adults. So are there any groups that would actually benefit from having an additional supportive adult, or are there any children that actually would work really well together as a supportive peer? So for example, you might have a running guide in a running race. There might be some activities that actually children are really, really reluctant to participate in, and it may be actually that for that activity they're given a leadership role, such as sort of the equipment manager or kind of supporting and coaching another child, so that although they're not physically participating, they are still sort of participating in the activity. It's important as well to consider having an adult at each station that's modelling personal best language. So as I mentioned about personal best, kind of supporting to create that inclusive environment, consistently modelling it will then support children to start using that language with each other. And it can be really helpful as well to share that information with parents, because if you are inviting parents into the sports day, I suppose from a lot of parents, when we grew up, sports day was very different, very much more competitive. So kind of sharing that shift in kind of approach and more the focus on personal best and style values will also support them to model that language. And I think, yes, moving on to Amy.
So yeah, just some of the resources we've got that could support you in planning and setting up and running your sports day. So we do have an EYFS Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 assembly PowerPoint, which is basically to prepare your children for sports day. And they include an immersive walkthrough of what children can expect to see, hear, feel and do on the day, just to prepare them for that. It also gives practical advice for managing those big feelings, just to help with that sensory and emotional whirlwind that sports day might present for some children. Reinforces the STAR values, which Danny's just spoken about, and how these sporting qualities are also a measure of success and not just sporting prowess and coming first. We also have an activity pack, which are one for EYFS Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. This is basically your comprehensive toolkit with everything that you would need to plan and set up and run a successful sports day, an inclusive sports day. This is where all the ideas for activities will be for traditional and non-traditional, as well as step-by-step instructions about how you might want to set them up. It includes in their guidance, as well as how you can include non-performers on sports day with a set of job lanyards so that all pupils can get involved, timers, scoring assistants, photographer, cheerleader, etc. And then finally, we also have an award pack, which has a selection of stickers and certificates in there, which align with our sort of P mastery approach, so that every child's contribution is recognised. So you've got your first, second, thirds, but you've also got, celebrating and recognising the STAR values, the taking part, and then maybe the certificates, obviously not on the day, because that's quite difficult to maybe fit in as well as everything else, but certificates for after the event if you wanted to include those. So there's loads of different sort of hacks, resources there for you that can help you with running your sports day.
So you've had a lot of information here to take in. So we've just put together a few key takeaways. I always think if I'm on a training, if there's a couple of things I can take away and action, then that's really helpful. So first of all is going back right to the beginning, making sure that you've got that really clear aim. You might have more than one aim, but a really, really clear aim for your sports day, for your school sports day, and tailor the day for your children and your community. Set the date and the location, and set that early if you can. Hopefully it's in the diary, but if it's not, get on to it really quickly. But also have a backup plan as well. So my daughter's school, I thought it's the first time I've seen it done as a parent, was that they actually they've given us 2 dates. So the first date, and if that doesn't go ahead, then the second date. So again, we can get that in the calendar. Get as many people involved as you can. The more people that you can get on board at an early stage, the easier the day is, the smoother the day is. So whether that be other staff members, other adults, maybe getting parents and carers to come in who have got a particular interest in it, linking up with the wider community, speaking to sports leaders, speaking to secondary PE teachers, and helping to get as many sports leaders and volunteers as possible for the day. Adapt those activities and events to suit all children, and our step guidance that Danny spoke about is so useful for that. Using those 4 criteria can adapt any activity to either support or challenge all children. Hold an assembly. You might use one of the assembly packs that Amy talked about earlier. Hold an assembly beforehand to share that information, to get children excited, but also to familiarize them with what's going to happen on the day, to really help them to regulate those emotions, and also give them time after that in the weeks running up to the sports day to practice and familiarize themselves with the activities they're going to do, so they know what's coming, and there's no surprises, but they know they can try their best. And most importantly, make it fun, make it positive and a memorable experience. Really trying to build those positive experiences of physical activity from early years all the way to being adults. Celebrate the STAR values, celebrate your school values, and particularly celebrate those individual personal bests, because you know we can all make progress, and all children can make progress against their personal bests. But also don't forget those sporting achievements as well, because that is really important as well, for children to be recognised for those particular sporting achievements there. Each of our sports day packs actually has an editable to-do list, which is really useful, and it just highlights obviously those key little things that sometimes we forget, and you can tick them off when you've done them, but you can add in your own specific bits there as well. You might be able to just see there that as well as a lot of the things we've already talked about, it mentions about factors to consider on the day, and that's things like your first aid arrangements, depending on the weather. Have you got a wet weather plan? Have you got a backup date? Have you got shaded and covered areas? I was thinking out in the UK, we're very good at preparing for wet weather, but we're not very good at preparing for actually really hot weather and sunny weather, and actually that is becoming more common now than probably a wet weather day. So really having those arrangements for if it is warm, making sure all the children have their hats, have their water, there are water stations, because you know ultimately that can affect probably a child's health or a staff member's health much more than actually being rained on, I always think. But it's often not considered quite as much. A sound system to communicate information, and also where will your spectators safely watch from? How will they be segregated from the children, but also be a part of that community day?
And all of those resources that we've kind of spoken about are part of the PE Mastery scheme, but the sports day content is available for free. So the PE Mastery scheme can be purchased as an additional add-on for schools. It's recently just been approved by the AFP, the Association for Physical Education. So we're an approved curriculum resource provider. It's been really carefully sequenced. It's skills-based, so it focuses on kind of mastering those basic skills, things like fundamental movement skills, but as well as just physical skills, looking more at kind of those holistic skills, so healthy participation, but also rule strategy and tactics, so sort of like your thinking skills and social skills as well. It's got lots of really exciting, engaging activities similar to the sports day content, and uses kind of personal best and star values, which we've spoken a lot about throughout. So have a go at the sports day kind of activities if you're interested, and if you'd like to find out more about PE Mastery, there are kind of like links to the PE Mastery website on there. Yeah, so as I said, it's sort of the three pillars that underpin the scheme are motor competence, so that's your physical skills, things like fundamental movement skills, and as we progress into upper key stage 2, sort of starting to develop some more specialised movement skills. Rule strategy and tactics, so sort of from a game-based perspective, but also from a composition and performance-based perspective when we're looking at things like gymnastics and dance. And then healthy participation, so that's sort of like how children participate, the kind of positive skills that they demonstrate, sports personship, participating fairly. So yeah, all of those things, and that includes the star values. Star values are kind of a heavily kind of like built into the scheme. Every activity has got a linked star values challenge. Personal best also is heavily kind of like built in throughout the scheme, and every activity also has kind of a personal best challenge. The reason for that is we want to encourage children to compete against themselves and kind of make progress, rather than compete against others. So it kind of builds in that really sort of positive PE environment. And there's also a lot of supporting inclusion resources. So every lesson has tailored now and next cards, tailored visual learning sequence to support children with the routines of the PE lesson.